Wander Wealthy Podcast, episode 109, with April Seifert. Hello, my loves. Welcome back to another episode of the Wander Wealthy Podcast. My name is Tess. If you're new to the show, hello, I'm your host, and Wander Wealthy is a place where we talk about money, both personal and business finances, and other hard stuff for the online service-based business owner. Today on the show, I am joined by April Seifert. I got to know April through her podcast, the Women Inspired podcast. She interviewed me and we talked a lot about money and how you can feel good about making a lot of it and why we should all try to make a lot of money. April is a social cognitive psychologist and self-proclaimed life experience junkie. She is so cool. She has so much knowledge. She specialized in studying how the brain stores information and how it impacts our behavior and our life experience. And I just had such a fun time connecting and asking April all of my questions because she's so good. She has this really great talent of being able to take her knowledge in social cognitive psychology and apply it to anyone's individual situation. And for us in particular, we really dove in this episode talking about life design, how to find the right path for you, why we hit resistance when we are trying to, implement this idea of life design, whether you realize you're implementing it or not, especially for those business owners out there. We probably went through a phase where we're like, I don't want to do what everyone else is doing, so I'm going to try my own thing. And then we also talk about this idea of developing psychological strength and why it is so important, especially for those who are running their own business when it comes to just taking risk, when it comes to setting high revenue goals, when it comes to pricing your services and feeling confident in those prices. April was so generous with her time and with her knowledge. She gives some really great exercises for each and every one of us to go through to really understand what we should be exploring in terms of different pathways in our lives. And, even outside of our business, it's important to look at designing your life in your relationship, in your hobbies, in anything else that you want to do. And April also has a really important story, one that comes from, some circumstances that weren't so favorable, that weren't so fortunate. And she talks about her experience of overcoming those situations in her life. And we dive into later on in the episode, her money story and how her life circumstances impacted money for her growing up and even into adulthood when she was making six figures in her traditional job. I had so much fun talking to April and really picking her brain, to be honest. So we're just going to dive on into the episode now. Here is episode 109 with April Seifert. April, welcome to the Wander Wealthy Podcast. You are a social cognitive psychologist. You run your own consulting company revolving around data science. You have an amazing side hustle / passion project / just like also evolving business, which your podcast, which I've been a guest on, Women Inspired, really dives into, and you're a self-proclaimed life experience junkie with so many hobbies and certifications. Tell us, how did you get to where you are today? What's the story behind all of that?
Well, I am way excited to be here. I'm so thrilled to be here. I loved our conversation on my podcast, so I'm really just pumped to talk to you again for another little bit. My backstory, wow, that is a windy one given where I'm at today, but I'll give you the Cliff's Notes version. So I grew up in the Midwest in just sort of what you would think of as a very, very traditional, boring, normal household. Mom, dad, had a brother, boring growing up existence. But when I was younger, I had a couple of very formative life experiences that were moments of adversity in my life. Well, more than moments, periods of adversity in my life. When I was very young, my dad was diagnosed with colon cancer. We watched him battle cancer for 5 years. He did all the things, absolutely all the things to fight the cancer that he had. But ultimately, he lost that battle when I was 11. So he passed away. And I have to say that at that stage, if you folks listening to this, think back to when you were 11 and where you were at in your life. That was really, obviously all of the grief that you would expect was there, but also as an 11-year-old, you're old enough to really understand what's happening at that stage. So I tell people that that was my first face-to-face realization that life is very short. Shortly after that, I started getting sick. I had some really crazy symptoms and side effects. I was experiencing a lot of numbness in my body and paralysis. I went blind twice, and it came back both times, and it was very strange. Through a very long diagnostic process, very, very long, we found out that I have multiple sclerosis. So I've been living with that for 25 years. Now, I bring up those two situations as very formative events in my life because what they both did was taught me how short life is and how precious it is. Because prior to each of those situations happening, I thought I lived a normal life. I thought everything was normal and fine and progressing, just like everybody else's was. And the thing that I've learned through those two is that it's normal and fine until it's not. That these unexpected things come up for everyone. And what we need to do is make the most of the time that we have here, live the best possible, most vibrant possible, most aligned possible life that we can while we can. So that mindset is really what led me as I, grew into adulthood. I went to graduate school, got my PhD in psychology, loved the field. That's what got me into data and statistics. I sort of accidentally stumbled into the field of data science. I'm so glossing over a lot of details here. But as that happened, I continually questioned, is this the right next step for me, given the way that I want my life to unfold? And sometimes that answer was yes. And sometimes, for example, in graduate school, deciding I don't want to be a professor, I want to go into applied research and I want to go into, an industry, that answer was no. And I took a little left turn. So every step of the way, my life has been a constant question of whether I'm still going in the direction that I want to go, given who I am now and what I'm excited about. And that literally led, I'm just going to go all the way up to the present, that literally led to me making decisions to start companies and making decisions to jump out of planes and making decisions to, go be a certified scuba diver or run marathons. Literally all those decisions were based off of, is this something that is aligned to who I am now and something that will enrich my life and give me an even better experience?
Thank you for leading us through that journey. My follow-up question to that is what you do with Women Inspired, and I know you give talks and work with people, is helping them kind of design their life and figure out, what's that thing for them, what's going to help them feel aligned and doing things that help them feel fulfilled. But why do you think, what keeps us stuck?
Yeah, so many things. This is, you touched on it a little bit with the work that I do with Women Inspired. I'm a big proponent of a field that is, I'll call it a little baby field these days. People are starting to talk about it. They're starting to realize that it's a thing. And this field is called life design. So people who are in corporate careers, or maybe people who have taken seminars from innovation consultancies and that type of thing, might have heard about the field of design thinking and human-centered design. This is typically a field that's applied to creating products or creating services. So like the Instant Pot was created using the human-centered design process. You get to know the people who are going to use the product and you design it around their needs so that they absolutely love it when the product comes out, right? Mm-hmm. So that field applied to people's lives is so interesting and so powerful, because what we do is we use the human-centered design process. We get to know the person at the middle of your life, which is just you. There's only one. So it's actually very simple. We just need to get to know you. And then we start to design around it. But what I found is that, again, this field is in its infancy. So I feel like I'm kind of standing on the shoulders of a couple of giants right now. Stanford has released a book, Harvard has released a book, and I've read both of them, and their approaches, while systematic and rigorous, they lack a key feature that I believe is the reason why people stay stuck, even if they know what they should do. And that is this notion of psychology. So my background in psychology really looks at things like people's identity and their belief systems and the way that they process success and failure, and cognitively the way that our minds work and the way that they've evolved and the way that we've trained them over our lives. Factors like that play an incredibly powerful role in our behavior and what we're willing to take on, goals we're willing to go after, and ultimately how successful we'll be in achieving those goals. So even, if there's someone listening to this and they're having an issue in a relationship or a friction point in a job, we can go through the life design process in a sterile way all we want to identify ultimately the change that you need to make. But what's going to help you get over that hump and what's going to help you actually move forward and get, quote, unstuck is tackling some of the psychological barriers that are keeping you in that place or that got you in that place in the first place.
I feel like there's so much here. Like,
we could talk for like 6 hours.
I know.
Help us all. Oh, no.
Right. Well, and I love this idea of life design and really starting with, this is what I think like career counseling, and just when I think back to how I was trying to pick the ultimate life route that I wanted to go through, which for me really revolved and still does revolve around career. And I've been kind of just dabbling with different things that I enjoy and don't enjoy, and was lucky and fortunate to be able to take the leap out of my corporate job that was very clearly not my route. But I think there's a lot of resistance up against this idea of exploring and being willing to make changes so that you can decide and, I don't know, I guess dabble, for lack of a better word, with things you might be interested in, whether it's your career or, different types of relationships or different activities and hobbies outside of the roadmap that either yourself or maybe your parents or your community that you surround yourself with has laid out for you. Does that make sense, what I'm trying to get at?
It totally does. I mean, the thing about it is that at our core as human beings, we are social people. We're absolutely social people. And research in psychology tells us that this is a good thing. I mean, one of the pillars, I do a lot in the field of positive psychology, which sometimes gets a bad reputation because people think, oh, these positive psychologists, they're just going to tell you to go around all day and pretend like everything is rosy and wonderful and just act like there's no negative in the world. That isn't it at all. When you look at the research, positive emotion or happiness and joy is only one small variable in the equation. A very big one is community and having positive relationships. Now that's great and that's protective, except we seek to remain, say, in compliance with those relationships, sometimes to our own detriment. And that holds us back from going after things that might go against the grain a little bit. Mm-hmm. And, I work with people on identifying which areas of their life are ones that, again, I mentioned it before, you are the person who is at the center of your life. There are certain decisions that no one else really gets to have an opinion on because they don't affect other people. So whether you decide to try a hobby that maybe seems weird to other people, their opinions don't get to count. They don't get to matter. And there are other aspects where we do need to take other people's, feelings and thoughts into consideration. But this idea of being in community, it is both protective and also limiting. And we need to keep that in mind when we think about how these relationships can impact, our behavior and what we're willing to go after and do.
Yeah, I feel like if, everyone had the capability or the resources to be able to dive into life design and figure out what those right pathways are for them that really align with who they are, I mean, we would be a happier world. We'd be a happier society. But a lot of it is also like that herd mentality of wanting to fit in. I think as a millennial, I'm like, oh, I totally get this idea of creating your own job and doing things online and being able to just kind of leverage the internet world to start exploring other opportunities and different ways to make money and different ways to live, being a digital nomad versus buying a house and doing the quote unquote American dream route. And my biggest resistance would be probably my family kind of looking at me and going, what? Why would you want to do that? Or like, how do you, they don't understand how I make money. They don't understand why I would want to not have kind of a permanent place. And that's probably the hardest thing I think that a lot of people face is that community resistance.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is, there's a lot of the work that I do, I teach some fundamental principles, some bottom line principles that if you understand these, it makes a lot of what seems like irrational behavior, it makes it all make sense. And one of these foundational principles is that our mind has evolved in a way that keeps us alive. Its job is to keep us alive. And like, congratulations, our species still exists. Good job. But merely existing and being alive, that's a pretty low bar. Right. And so our mind has these tendencies, it has these habits and biases toward finding threats. So your mind is literally going around all day long looking for threats. That's not a happy way to live your life, but that's what its jumping off point is, and its habit. Its habit is to look for ways to make sure that we are not deviating from our quote unquote tribe. And this goes back to, caveman days when if you didn't have a tribe of people around you, you were not likely to survive. Again, your brain wants to put you in a situation where you are more likely to live. Not like live fully, but just like maintain breathing and a heartbeat. So when you start to move away from your quote unquote tribe or that group of people, especially very close people, family around you, close blood relatives, it's so difficult for people. But what I'll say on the flip side of that, another thing that is psychologically really difficult for people is acting in a way that's not in alignment with who you are. What you experience psychologically in that situation is something called cognitive dissonance, which if you've taken an initial psych class, you've probably heard about. It's really damaging to people to live in that dissonance place where their actions and their behaviors do not match their identity and who they think they are. So that dissonance can be another thing that really controls our behavior and makes us tend to act in accordance with who we ultimately believe that we are.
Yeah, I think that's something that we don't think about when we're trying to figure out like what we should be doing with our lives. Like we don't think about like, oh, what would I really want? And sometimes we think about it, but then we have a hard time uncovering like what would really be in alignment or what would really feel fulfilling. Do you have like an exercise that you take people through to really understand how to find direction, I guess?
I have a 6-week program that's called Life Design Lab where we go into depth on this. It's very, very systematic using the human-centered design process and a lot of psychology woven in. But one thing that I will tell people that is a beautiful place to start. Self-awareness is an elusive thing. People think that they're self-aware, but very few people actually are, because true self-awareness, I don't think you can get there 100% in a lifetime. It's literally just peeling back layers of an unending onion, I think. What a great place to start is, and it takes a lot of intention, put it that way. So what I would encourage people to do is figure out 4 things about yourself. So take a strengths and weaknesses test. So Gallup has an amazing one called Strengths Finder. There's other ones out there. 16personalities.com is really great. They give you a really great personality profile. Figure out what your strengths and weaknesses are. Number 1, write those down. So those two areas, write those down. The third area, figure out what the Google list of personal values and just grab those values. Get yourself down to your top 3 to 5. You're going to make some brutal cuts here. Like, do you value your health or your family more? Like, I mean, it's going to get brutal to get down to 3 to 5, right? But do it. Like, do it and be honest with yourself. So now you've got strengths, weaknesses, values. And then I want you to sit for a moment, get quiet, take some deep breaths. And I want you to think about yourself and who you aspire to be when you are at your absolute best. What do you look like when you've eaten well, slept, drank water, moved your body, your cup is full, like you are at your best? What do you aspire to be in that moment? So if you know those 4 things, strengths, weaknesses, values, aspirations, start to apply those. To what degree does your career align to those 4 things? To what degree does your romantic relationship align to those 4 things? How about your friendships? How about your hobbies? How about your finances? How about your calendar? All of those things, when put next to who you truly are, and there's a lot to this process, so I'm kind of hitting surface level right now, but even this exercise, you can uncover a lot. Because you can start to realize, interesting, I value I value interaction and close interaction with people, and my strength is communication, and I spend a lot of time alone in my job. That's misaligned, and maybe that's why I'm not loving my job very much right now. I'm lonely. You can start to diagnose what's actually happening, and then once you know what it is, you can fix it. But without that very clear idea of what is causing that friction point and why, you just have no idea where to go from there.
Yeah, I think that's really important to sit with all of those. And this is really good for me, even personally, because I think about, I'm in this interesting, pivotal kind of transitional moment of, and people who have listened to the podcast know that, I'm transitioning my audience to go from traditionally employed to self-employed. And that's been a brand decision for me because it feels much more in alignment with even just how I live my life. And so I think whether people are traditionally employed or self-employed, when it comes to career, that career aspect, doing this kind of life design exercise and really figuring out what feels in alignment and what feels like it's going to be fulfilling, but also just reflective of what you said, your personal values, is a really good thing to do. And even if it's just like you just need a change of pace, or you need a change of scenery, or you just need to change it up to try the other thing, and then know that it's okay to go back if that's what you're going to do. And this also gets me into one of the big things that you're really touching on lately is this psychological strength. And I think this is so key, especially for the business owners out there. I like to say that like business ownership, entrepreneurship is such a huge exercise in personal development. And like we can dive into the psychology, and like I think everyone needs a little bit of therapy and someone to work through personal issues, but like the true test of where you stand on a personally developmental level is like putting yourself out there and trying to sell yourself in this way of being this online business owner or whatever form of ownership you take. But I want to dive into that idea of psychological strength. How do you see this as being an important state of mind to develop for an online entrepreneur?
Yeah. So psychological strength, let me just give people a good working definition of it just to ground us all in what we're talking about. And then I'll talk about how it applies to entrepreneurs, because wow, does it ever. As one, I totally get it. So psychological strength, we think about this as a developed state of empowered resiliency. So there's some keywords there that I want to hit on and unpack. Developed means this is something that you can work on. Think about it like building a muscle. When you go to the gym, you may start by lifting 10 pounds. That 10 pounds eventually becomes easier. You lift 15 pounds. That 15 pounds becomes easier. You lift 20. You're building up your muscles. We know from research in growth mindset, we know from research in neuroplasticity, even into adulthood, well into adulthood, throughout our lives, our brains are malleable, more malleable than we thought that they were. And you can change the way that they operate. Let's go back to that. I'm going to keep going back to this foundational principle. Your brain and your mind are there to keep you alive. That means they're looking for threats, looking for negativity, looking for things that'll kill you, looking for, conflict, looking for problems. That is not a great way to live your day-to-day life in a modern society where there's nothing most days that's trying to kill us. Right. But your mind goes there. So we talk about psychological strength as a way of balancing the way that your mind operates. Because, and this is again where that preconceived notion of positive psychology comes in, and people think you're just trying to be happy all the time. I will tell you right now, if you do nothing, if you just let your mind do its own thing, your thinking is so incredibly biased, it's not even funny. It is so incredibly biased to the negative because that's what our minds were evolved to do. Mm-hmm. So what we do with these psychological strength exercises is we start to unpack that and understand it, and then we start to tip the scales and balance things out. So if people have ever heard about gratitude practices and rolled their eyes and thought that they were dumb and whatever, I'm telling you there is brain science behind the fact that they work. And the reason why they work is that they're pushing the scale down on that positive side, not to make you think you should be grateful for tiny things all the time and ignore the negative. But because your mind is constantly focusing on the negative, you need to balance it out. And there's a million other exercises and nuances to it. But people absolutely can develop psychological strength. It's something you can intentionally work on. It's something you can get stronger at. And the main thing here is we want you thinking in a more balanced way so that when negative things happen, they do. When a potential client tells you no, when you hit a low month and you're not making as much as you wanted to entrepreneurially, when, something happens in your family or you get sick or whatever, you're not death spiraling down this negative place. You're really thinking about how you're going to move forward and what you're going to do in a much more balanced, realistic, rational way. So it's a way for people to approach life in a more balanced way. And it's a way I want people to feel empowered. I want people to know that this is something that they can decide to develop, and it'll absolutely change the way that they experience their day-to-day life, particularly entrepreneurs, when you're going to have unknowns and surprises and opportunities come out of nowhere that you need to be able to handle them in a strong way. So psychological strength it's incredibly important for everybody, but for people in entrepreneurial roles, doubly so.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious. Well, first and foremost, I love that you say there's brain science behind the gratitude practice, because, a lot of people are like, oh, that just feels redundant. And I've felt that way at times. But when I started learning more and more about the brain and just mindset in general, and kind of trying to tie the two, because I'm a person that we're both analytical folks. So we need that backing. But I love the idea of just, trying to be a better person through gratitude or meditation or whatever form of, I guess, personal development you would want to explore. My question to you is, I've worked with a lot of people where, and you kind of alluded to this, they feel like problems just keep flooding in and keep happening to them. And on the flip side of that, there's the whole manifestation, abundance kind of mindset and focusing on the positive. So how do you feel about the term manifestation as a psychologist? And is it really science backed that people who, other than there's clearly a difference between those with significant privilege and those who are very underprivileged. But if we can kind of separate the two and just look at being problem focused versus solution focused, how people can overcome. Those are two different questions. I apologize, but
no worries.
I think you get where I'm going.
Yeah. So let's unpack the first one. Let me give you an example that is out of the context of what we're talking about. Just follow me down this crazy example. I promise it's relevant. Okay. So pretend you're at the zoo, right? And you're walking around and there's all these exhibits, and you walk up to a particular exhibit and you're at an indoor portion of the zoo, and you're looking behind the glass, and there's vines and leaves and rocks and all this stuff. And on the plaque next to it is some name of a species of an animal that you don't recognize. And you know that the animal is in there somewhere, right? And so you read the name and you're looking for the animal and you're like, I don't know. There's like a bird in there. Is that it? Like, I don't know. What am I looking for? Is it a reptile? What is this thing? Like, I'm looking for it. I'm looking for it. I'm looking for it. I can't find it. Now, what the zoo does is they tell you the name of the species, but they give you a picture of what the animal looks like. So when you look at it, you can think, oh, it's sort of like a raccoon-looking thing. It's like slightly larger than a small dog. It's brown and furry. It has a tail. Cool. Oh, there it is. It's like sitting over there. Okay, cool. The bird just flew in there randomly. That is not what I was looking for. That little fuzzy guy over there, that is what I was looking for. I give that example because our brains, in general, is another foundational concept. Our brains, in general, are really good at looking for something. They are not good at looking at something. So looking at it means, okay, it's a weird species of an animal. Look at this habitat and find it. I have no idea. You need to give it a clear picture of what you're looking for. It's good at looking for an animal that looks like that clear picture that's on the plaque. We're really good at that. So in terms of manifestation, this is my official stance on it. I have no idea if our brains have vibrational waves. I have no flipping clue. I haven't studied any, and by studied, I mean I haven't done research myself or gone into the peer-reviewed literature. Sure, I've read blogs and things like that, but you and I are very analytical. I want some peer-reviewed research. I want something that is more rigorous than that. And this isn't to say that people who read those blogs and love it, I don't care. Ultimately, here's what I care about. I care that that entrepreneur has a crystal clear vision of what they want their brain to find for them. Meaning, if you're thinking about, okay, I need to grow my business this year, and this means that I need to expand my network, and it needs to include people who have experience in marketing. You need to get a crystal clear picture in your mind of that. I need to find people who have experience in marketing. I need to find marketers. I need to find people who are really killing it in different forms of marketing. That's what I'm looking for. Your brain has an incredible ability to goal seek for you. In a sea of LinkedIn profiles, you're going to notice the one that says marketer more quickly if you've told your brain that's what you're looking for. Now, did that happen because you vibrated out a certain way and the universe put that profile in front of you? I don't know. Ultimately, I don't care the mechanism through which it works. What I can tell you is that the science I do know of and that I have read in a peer-reviewed journal article way tells us that at least one of the mechanisms through which this is working is that your brain is super good at goal seeking for you. So give it a clear picture. It'll try to find it for you. So that relates to your example of entrepreneurs constantly seeing problems that are coming up and constantly seeing issues. The mindset that entrepreneur goes into each day is going to dictate how many problems they see, how big those problems are, and how easily they are able to get over them. If they're seeing a bunch of tiny little minuscule problems, that might be an indication that they are too in the weeds in their business and someone else needs to be handling those for them. The mindset that they go into, this is the size of problem that I should handle in my business, that dictates whether that problem is theirs to deal with in their mind. And two, I can't tell you how many times in my own business, something that I thought was a problem in the beginning was a massive opportunity. Like a massive opportunity or a massive sign that I needed to pivot or change. I have a membership right now that is on a technology platform that we're having quote unquote problems with. That is an indication that we need to make a change. And so we're making that change. I'm not wallowing in the fact that, this isn't working as well as I wanted it to. No, like take some responsibility. This is your business. Move forward, make a change. But now I know, again, crystal clear vision. Now I know what those bullet points are that this new technology platform has to have in order for it to work. So get your brain a really clear picture, crystal clear, of what you want it to find for you. And I promise you it'll goal seek for you.
I love that. I think that really helps, especially for those who just like aren't so into the idea of manifestation and brain vibrations and whatnot. Having something else like some data, some brain science to back that can help, because I think regardless of the mechanism, as you said, it's the idea of thinking positively. It's the idea of setting goals that are, maybe a bit beyond your comfort zone, but then you're challenging yourself to think in that positive direction instead of just believe that you're only capable of achieving the easy things, the kind of like shoo-ins goals. And that leads me to kind of the last thing that we'll touch on. And this is really like, you've provided so many good tangible tips, but one that I want to kind of end with is, since it's a money podcast, talking about money goals, especially for business owners, setting revenue goals, or like having the psychological strength to set big revenue goals, but also, be able to have the strength to approach your clientele or your customer base and be like, hey, these are my new prices. This is where I have to go in order to take my business this way.
Yeah. So I'll give you two things. They're sort of in two different domains. One is around, this is a psychological concept. One is around personal identity. We all develop cognitively. So cognitively, our minds are, I like to say, our minds are powerful. They are not sophisticated. So they're extremely powerful because they affect our behavior like you cannot believe. I mean, with incredible consequences, our behaviors are affected by the way that our minds habitually work and automatically work. Our identity, and really any other way that we store information, it's in the form of associations, meaning stuff that co-occurs often together in our lives. Think babies now, like from baby on. Stuff that co-occurs often in our lives makes us store that information together in sort of a clump in our mind. And when one of the pieces of that clump gets activated, the entire clump activates because it's adaptive, right? Our brain is trying to like help us out and prime itself to be ready to go. So around the concept of money, this is like, there's a lot of people out there in internet land pontificating about money mindset. I halfway roll my eyes because they don't, I don't think, hit on the key mechanism through which this is actually working. They have a point. Money mindset is a thing. There is, again, brain science behind it. There absolutely is. But what happens is your identity as a person, the way that you would fill in the blank, I'm the type of person who. I'm not talking about roles. I'm a mom, I'm a whatever. Nope. I'm talking about I'm the type of person who. That type of question is the identity I'm talking about. And we develop ideas around that, like I'm the type of person who takes risks or doesn't. I'm the type of person who can start her own business, or maybe you don't believe that you are. I'm the type of person who makes $500,000 a year. Are you? Do you believe it at your core? If you had 3 extra glasses of wine today and you were like a little buzzed and your inhibitions were down and you were super honest with yourself, is that how you'd answer that question? That's what I want people to answer. How much money do people like you make? Because that limitation, that's going to cap what you're going to allow your business to grow toward. Again, your mind, and this goes back to that cognitive dissonance notion that I talked about before. Mm-hmm. Your mind wants to keep you in a place where your behaviors and your identity and your belief systems and your actions and all of that, they're nicely aligned. And if you believe that you are only worth 50 grand, your mind will not let you act in a way that is not in accordance with that. So as you approach that 50 grand level, you're going to start to get uncomfortable and you're going to start to pump the brakes. It's literally just your mind trying to keep you in a psychologically safe place. So if you want to make more than that, whatever it is you're making today, if you want to make more than that, You need to convince yourself that you are the type of person who makes that much money. Because what happens then is your brain is like, hang on, I said I know I'm the type of person who makes $500,000 a year, and I only have $100,000 in the bank. Where's my money? And it starts to goal seek. Mm-hmm. Where's my money? Where's the opportunity? Where's the new product line? Where's the new service offering? Where's the new revenue structure? Where's the new billing structure? Where's the new something strategically that I can change in my business that will get me to that point that I know I'm supposed to make? So that's one. Identity. Get your identity wrapped around the idea of the amount of money that you want to make and believe it. Like even when you're drunk and you're like uninhibited, believe that number. Number two, pricing and asking for a sale. Actually, just not pricing. Let's talk about selling. Sales is a difficult thing for some entrepreneurs, particularly early entrepreneurs, and especially entrepreneurs who are selling themselves, selling a service. Mm-hmm. You, the person, you are not your service. You are not the product. You're a person. You're a human being who is this genetic impossibility, right? Bazillions of other people have been born and they genetically are not you. You are the one and only one of you that will ever happen. And that in and of itself makes you insanely valuable as a person. No one else's opinion, no one's yes or no, no one's decision to pay you or not, none of that. Your success of your business, it has nothing to do with your value as a person. You are a genetic impossibility. You're the only one here. You're valuable just as a birthright. So someone saying no to your service, which is not you, they're saying no to your service, not you. So sometimes we get scared to sell because we think, like, let's put it on me. I do public speaking, right? It's me. I'm there. I'm the one out on stage. I'm the one talking to people. The service I'm providing is not me, though. The service I'm providing is the motivation that I can give an audience. It's the feeling I can give an audience. It's the energy I can bring. It's not me, core, as a human being. So sell your butt off and don't worry if people are saying no. From the perspective of like being scared that it makes you less valuable as a person or being scared that you're going to feel bad if they say no. Don't feel bad. They're not saying no to you. They're saying no to your product or service. Has nothing to do with you. So get out there and sell it. Pivot in the marketplace if you need to, like whatever, iterate your product and service, make it good for the marketplace, but it is separate from you. And work on that, like divorcing yourself from your product or service, and you will find sales will become so much easier to do.
I love that idea of believing that we each individually are infinitely valuable. I mean, that's kind of like what you were saying is like, there's no one that can be genetically the same as you. It's impossible to recreate you, I guess, unless you clone yourself. But really being able to kind of show up with that belief of like, I'm infinitely valuable. So, like, it doesn't matter. This doesn't reflect on who I am because I know that I am worth like $1 infinity dollars. I don't know how to say infinity dollars.
Whatever. Like, but all the dollars.
All the dollars. Yes. And so, yeah, you don't need to take the service or the package or whatever it is that you're selling to heart and personally. So that should, and easier said than done, but being able to kind of remove that personal attachment to what you're selling so that you can show up and charge the rates that you need to charge in order to keep your business running.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to go back to the public speaking thing again. I'm selling what I'm selling when I sell a public speaking event and get paid for it is I'm selling energy, I'm selling motivation, I'm selling knowledge, I'm selling sometimes a workshop and a transformation for the audience. In order for me, this clicked for me because I realized if I'm emotionally in the right state, I can kill it on stage. If I'm emotionally in a bad place or just energetically I'm tired and, you're just kind of like sluggish, It's not going to go well. And so I thought about it and I'm like, you know what? What are they paying for? I'm showing up either way, right? My body is on that stage one way or the other. You think they want to pay for the me who's tired and in a, like bad emotional state? No, they're not paying for me. They're paying for the product I can deliver. So that's when I started doing this like pre-speaking gig routine where I get myself into a position where the product I'm delivering is the best possible product I can get out there, the best, highest value product I can give. I get myself into that position because it's not me they're buying.
Awesome. April, thank you so much. All of this was very, very helpful. And I know that especially for those who are like, oh, I hear all this money mindset jargon or manifestation and all of that, this gives them something to really like sink their teeth into in terms of like, you want real stuff? Here's some real stuff. Here's some stuff that you might be able to grasp that's data backed. I want to go into the money round where we get a little more personal details on your money life. The first thing that always interests me and always interests my audience members is just learning a little bit more about you and how you grew up around money and how maybe that's impacted your relationship with money today, or things you've noticed that you've had to pivot in your own personal life because you noticed that maybe the way that your parents or your peers or your community acted around money didn't serve you in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mentioned earlier on, right at the beginning of our chat today, I mentioned the situations that my family went through, right? With my dad passing away and me getting sick. Financially, that ruined our family. And so I want people to think back to college, to those Totino's pizzas that you used to like open your mouth and yawn and inhale 5 of them. Like they were like $1.99 or something like that, maybe 99 cents if they were on sale, a pizza. That fed our whole family. One of them fed our whole family. Like I never understood as a kid why I couldn't have a second glass of milk. I loved milk. It's because it was too expensive. Why can't I be in gymnastics? It's because it's too expensive. Why can't I be in band? It's too expensive. We couldn't afford these things. And it's not just mindset. Legit, we had no money. Mm-hmm. So my mom didn't go to college. She went down the track that women of her generation were supposed to do. She did everything, quote unquote, right. She lived with her parents until she got married. She moved in with my dad after she got married. He was the breadwinner. She worked at a bank. She had a job. We were a 2-income family, but my dad was definitely the breadwinner. And then he passed away. My mom had nothing to go back on. And she had 2 grieving kids who literally were like adrift at that point and had to figure it out. And when I got sick, MRIs, not cheap. Neurological testing, not cheap. And the medication that I've been on for 25 years, it's a form of interferon. It's an injection that I give myself every week. It's these days, in that time, it was about $2,000 a month. It's approaching $4,000 now.
Wow.
Not cheap. And we had bad insurance back then.
Yeah.
So the financial situation we were in was not good. And I grew up not because my mom wanted this, not because my family, had any bad intentions at all. My mom was brilliant at, keeping us fed and doing well with next to nothing. She was brilliant. But you learn quickly money is something that is scarce, that you should be afraid of, that will always cause anxiety. Now, as I got into my career, I went to college, I went to grad school, got my PhD, got a great job out of graduate school, worked my way up in the corporate environment, that whole normal side of my career before I sort of went off the path.
Went off the rails like all
dark
of us.
Side of entrepreneurship. Right. So when I was normal, I was making great money, but I realized I was still anxious and I was still putting myself on an insanely restrictive budget every single week, even though I didn't need to. And it wasn't until a number of years into my career where I was making 6 figures nicely and I should have been fine and comfortable. I realized, oh, isn't that funny? I'm just as anxious as I was when we had no money. It's not about the money. It's about my relationship with it. No amount of money in my current mindset will allow me to be calm about this situation. It's not the money. I don't need to make more to make myself feel calm. I need to work on my brain to make myself feel calm. You want to talk about psychological strength? That's it right there. There's a beautiful example of it. I had to work to make my, balance my thinking out and stop going down this threat path. And this scarcity path is the word that most people use these days. Mm-hmm. I had to get myself to a position where I trusted myself. I knew I could make money. I knew it was okay. And that it was going to keep coming. Even if I got laid off, I knew that I could get another job or I could start a business. I would always be able to make money. And it took a long time and it took a lot of work. But coming from a place where money was very scarce, it took me a long time to get to the place where I could feel comfortable with it.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
That is so important. And I think a lot of those who assume, and I think this is especially for business owners, they're like, when I get to the point where my business is making 6 figures or 5-figure months, we think like that's when everything's going to be okay. And so often there's like that much deeper psychological aspect that you need to work on as well. Because like for a lot of people, we just think that like some number is going to solve the problem. Even if they don't have, major health bills that they have to cover. They just think like this number is what I have to hit in order to feel accepted or to feel fulfilled or to feel like I'm finally going to approve of my own business. When in fact, like you can do a lot of the math to figure out what you really need as an individual or as a family or whatever you need to pay the bills for yourself and then your employees and keep your business running. But you also need to do the mental work and build that psychological strength up too, to really go, this is enough. I think a lot of us get into this spiral of like, but what's enough? And that can cause a lot of harm because we end up either oversaving or overspending out of rebellion for whatever the opposite is that maybe we did or our parents did, or however our family operated when we were younger. And so it's really interesting to just start exploring that. So thank you for sharing. I'm like, already thinking we need to bring you back on. So if you are listening to this podcast and you want April to come back on, send us your questions and we'll bring you back on to answer some more, especially money mindset stuff, because I love this conversation. Okay, moving on. What is your current money plan? And when I ask that question, I mean, how do you make money? Because I feel like you make money in a couple different ways. What do you spend your money on and what are you saving for currently?
So how do I make my money? A couple ways. I'm 1/3 owner of a customer experience and revenue growth strategy firm where I do our data science work. That's like a total mouthful. I do a lot of like consulting. And we consult with major brands and major companies about how they can grow their revenue with their existing customer base through innovation and some data and insight work. That's where the large majority of my revenue these days comes from. Project-based work for the entrepreneurs out there. I don't bill hourly. If you can get away from it, do not bill hourly. Google value-based pricing. There's a book, I think it's called Value-Based Pricing. Read it. It'll change your life. Anyway, so that's where the majority of my revenue comes from. I also do my own sort of passion stuff, as you alluded to. So I run the podcast. The podcast itself is literally and will always be a passion project. I don't take I don't have sponsors, so I'm not like selling mattresses and selling other things through my podcast. No offense to people who do, like, dude, make your money. It's just not, it just was never, that was never the intent for it. And so that's not what I do with the podcast. But I interview amazing women who are doing incredible things and get their stories out there, such as yourself. And then I recently, as you can tell, this concept of psychological strength and life design there's something that I'm so incredibly passionate about. So I recently teamed up with one of my friends from graduate school. She's a licensed clinical psychologist. So I'm a social cognitive psychologist. And she and I started something that is called Peak Mind, the Center for Psychological Strength. You can go to www.peakmindpsychology.com and you can kind of see what we're all about. But basically, there were all of these incredible tools and techniques that are so powerful in the fields of especially psychology that they change people's lives. Frankly, they just do. It's incredible. But the only way you could get access to them was through therapy, which is amazing. I've gone to therapy twice. It was incredible. But you don't always need therapy. You do always need to strengthen your mind. You absolutely do. So you could only get at them in therapy or in journal articles that were so obscure and published in places that no one will ever find and written in a way that no one can understand. So we are bringing that information to people in the form of a membership. You can kind of think about it as a gym membership for your mind. So peakmindpsychology.com. We're offering a membership. It's growing. It's awesome. It's been so fun. And we're just teaching people these concepts of psychological strength and giving them hands-on exercises and ways to develop self-awareness and build psychological strength in their daily lives. So that's how I make money these days. My sort of thought process around it is think about the way that you invest. So this is for entrepreneurs again, too. Think about your investment strategy, right? You don't take all your money and put it into one stock. Right. That's crazy. You don't do that. You put it into multiple places, balance out the way that you're invested. So if one area takes a hit, it's unlikely to hit your whole portfolio, etc. I'm working on diversifying my revenue streams, frankly, because I don't want to get a job again. So if something happens and one of my revenue streams slows down, I've got another one that's keeping me afloat while I balance things out again. So it's just a strategic way that I'm thinking about my total revenue portfolio that I would suggest entrepreneurs do as well. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. And finally, what I spend my money on, I try to do the life design process in the way that I spend money. So what do I value? What's going to bring me happiness? And that's what I spend money on. So it tends to be experiences, which is why I like skydiving and scuba diving and travel and that type of thing. Experiences, getting those for me and for my family, especially my daughters, getting them out into the world and experiencing life.
Very cool. And what are you saving for right now?
Oh, man. Okay. So I'm going to let the cat out of the bag on this really crazy goal that I have, like insane goal. We have this weird house. We've got a 100-year-old house that sits on a little over 2 acres, like in the Minneapolis area. So it's this rare gem, but it used to be a working horse farm. So in our front yard is a 4,000 square foot horse barn. It smells like a barn. It has horse stalls in it. It's a barn. My crazy goal is that I want to pay off my house, my current residence that I live in, and I want to push a bunch of money into renovating that barn as a guest house. I just believe that is the direction that I'm supposed to go. I believe that someone's going to need to live in it someday. And I think we are going to be very grateful someday that we have this second residence that's close to us for people to stay in when they need to. So it sounds nuts. It's a little bit vague and opaque and very long term, but it's a very crystal clear goal that I've got my sights set on right now.
That sounds lovely. We're going to go into the final round, which is the quick and dirty Q&A. So these are just a couple fast-paced questions to wrap up the show. And the first one, I'm sure you could do a whole psychological experiment on. What is one totally random thing you just can't stop thinking about?
Totally random thing I can't stop thinking about. Getting my skydive rig back because it is in and being serviced right now, and I want it back.
Is that like the thing you wear on your back that
holds your parachute and yeah. So there's a little there's a little computer in it that pops your reserve parachute if something happens and you're in trouble in the air. And that had to go in for service. So it's just sitting at my rigger right now.
Interesting. How often do you go skydiving?
I haven't been for a long time because I've been having kids. So I'm like 2 years out of the sport and easing my way back into it.
Okay, who's your favorite person to follow on social media?
Ooh, that's tough. That changes daily. Oh my goodness, that changes daily. Today, this is going to sound crazy. I'm really loving following this guy named Tyler McCall. He does Instagram growth strategy. I don't follow him for that reason. I just think he's such a nice person. he's just such a great person, and he just makes me happy. So I love following him.
What is your favorite book? And I feel like we need to narrow this down. Your favorite book that'll help us develop psychological strength.
It's called Flourish. It is a book by Martin Seligman. He's sort of the OG of positive psychology, but this goes through all the pillars of what makes for what's called a good life, meaning a life where you're thriving or flourishing. It's more than just happiness and feeling good. So I would pick that book up and and read through that book. I'm also going to say, too, What Color is Your Parachute? Has nothing to do with skydive, but for people who are looking for career direction or entrepreneurial direction, pick up and do that book. Do every exercise in that book. It'll change your life.
Best piece of life advice that you've been told that you'd like to pass along?
You are going to live once. You're going to be here once. People will be motivated to think about that at a surface level. Sit with it and think about the fact that you're not going to be here someday. And let that give you the confidence and motivation and the sense of urgency to go after the things you want. Because ultimately, it does not matter. It's all going to be fine. So go after the stuff you want because you're only going to get one shot here. And man, make it worth it.
I love that. April, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing your story, for sharing your money story, for sharing all these lessons that you've learned and helping us start to get the tools to develop our lives, to start designing our lives, to build that psychological strength. I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing all of your knowledge. You are just so smart and well-spoken, and it makes me feel good to just like have you on and explain some of these very complex things to us. So thank you. I'd love for you to tell us where we can find you so we can continue to follow along with you and keep in touch.
Yeah, so a couple places. You can go to aprilseifert.com. That's a little bit hard to spell, so easier to find me if you go to peakmindpsychology.com. You can also find me there. And I'm on Instagram. I'm very easy to find on Instagram and also on LinkedIn. So connect with me in any of those places. I love chatting psych strength with people. I love chatting about how this applies to our lives, not just something we think about and learn about, but something we do. So I would love to connect with you all.
Awesome. We will link up everything so people can get to your website super easily and connect with you on social media. Thank you once again. I feel very knowledgeable and even a little bit personally strengthened. So I'm going to go out and conquer the day. Thank you so much.
Yay. Thank you so much for having me. This has just been so much fun chatting with you.
And that's a wrap on my interview with April Seifert. This was episode 109, and you guys know if you want to link up with April or you want to get access to all of the resources that she shared in this episode, you can head to wanderwealthypodcast.com/podcast/episode 109. Now, before I let you go, I just want to say, if you're looking to build your business in the most profitable way, even if you've been in business for a while, you're trying to figure out those numbers I was talking about in this episode, where you got to do the number stuff, you also got to do the mindset stuff. And we tackle both of those here at Wander Wealthy, but first and foremost, I want you to understand what those numbers really need to be and how you can implement profit easily in your business using a simple calculation. So if you want to start diving down my easy profit roadmap, I have a 5-step signature roadmap that I lead my clients down. You can download the free 5-step easy profit roadmap to get an idea of what that roadmap looks like and get access to that easy profit calculation. So go to wanderwealthy.com/roadmap if you want to download that, and that will give you an idea of how we can dive into this work even more. Lastly, I'd love to hear what you thought of this episode. And of course, if you want April to come back and you want some of your personal questions answered about money mindset, about psychological strength, about anything else that we covered, or maybe just, questions you have that you think she'd be really great at covering. I had mentioned that I'd love for her to come back and really dive into the science behind this whole money mindset facade that a lot of us put out there in the world. There is really good stuff, really helpful steps that you can take by applying various money mindset exercises. But some of us, we need more than just, manifest and think happy thoughts and be positive and journal about your goals as if you've already achieved them. Those are really good exercises, but if you want to know why that stuff is effective, I think April will be a really great person to come on the show and answer those questions. So go ahead, take a screenshot of this episode, especially if you're listening on your phone. It's super easy. Screenshot it and share it on Facebook or on Instagram. If you're on Instagram, you can tag me at Tess_Wicks. You can also tag April. Her handle is at April Seifert, Seifert, is how you spell her last name, or you can tag us at Wander Wealthy if you're posting on Facebook. But regardless, I want to hear from you. I want to see that you're listening to the episode, and I'd love to know what your questions are. So you can send me a DM. I love talking to you all on Instagram or on Facebook. That is usually the best way to get a hold of me, and from there, we can get your questions answered. All right, my friends, that's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for being here. You guys rock. And until next week, I hope you wander wealthy.